In today's episode, Mara asks, could you please let me know if you are considering preparing a newsletter on the ecological cost of AI? I'm wondering about the issue and would like your take on it. This is a very interesting question because it's not really well defined yet. We know fundamentally that generative AI and the graphics processing units that are required to power them generally require electricity, right? They require electricity, sometimes in decently sized quantities, to be able to power the server farms and the server rooms that run these things. When you look at a company's product like ChatGPT, behind the scenes, there are a large number of data centers that the software has to run on that have to have an enormous number of GPUs, graphics processing units, the same cards that allow video games to be played at with very high resolution. And that all costs energy, right? That all requires energy. Now, a lot of the bigger tech companies, particularly ones like Microsoft and Google, they are doing a good job of adding things like solar and wind to their facilities so that they're not using carbon as much, but there is still a carbon cost to these tools. How much depends on the model, how long it takes to train, and then what it costs to run. So, for example, the GPT-3 model from OpenAI was estimated to have cost about 500 tons of CO2. Facebook's Llama model, the Llama 2 model, cost 173 tons of CO2. Now, those sound like big numbers, but to put it in context, a single flight from New York City to Los Angeles is 65 tons, right? So a plane that goes there, back, and there again costs more carbon than the entirety of the Llama model. And that means, in turn, yes, 173 tons is worse than 0 tons, but at the same time, with the thousands and thousands of airline flights every single day, it's not that much extra in the big picture. Where we are starting to see some ecological impacts is actually on water. There's an interesting AP News article, and I'll put a link in the blog post that goes with it. An AP News article was talking about how much water is consumed for data centers, and you sit there and think, like, for what? For cooling. Data centers that operate in environments where the temperature is above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 27 Celsius, need to use water for cooling because the sheer amount of heat that these things generate is impressive. The further into cold environments you can build a data center, the more you can use air versus water to cool the software and the hardware. So if you were to build, say, a data center in Nome, Alaska, you wouldn't need to use any water because it's cold there pretty much all the time. There will be ecological consequences of venting a lot of heat into the atmosphere from a data center, but that's going to be mostly localized because, again, these machines themselves are not generating carbon, they're just generating heat. They will generate carbon from dirty power sources, so burning oil, burning coal, whatever the burning thing is. If it's not solar, wind, or geological, it's creating carbon in some kind. The amount of water that these things use is in the billions of gallons of water planet-wide. In the same AP News article, there was a quote that said that 5 queries in ChatGPT cost about 16 ounces of water. Basically, one bottle of bottled water is used to cool the data center. Now, again, there are options here. Data centers can and should be looking at geothermal, right? Because you dig down, 50 feet, 100 feet into the ground, and you're at basically a constant 53 Fahrenheit, which is 53 Fahrenheit is 11 Celsius. That is more than cold enough to be able to cool stuff as long as your geothermal network itself is big enough, because obviously if you're cranking out huge amounts of heat, any cooling system will reach its limits. So there are ecological costs. This stuff is not free. However, this is where models like Llama 2 from Facebook or from Meta really matter. When you run ChatGPT with the GPT-4 model, that costs a processing time in big compute centers. If you are using a tool like LM Studio and you're using Llama 2 on your laptop, that's a much lower cost and it's more distributed, right? You're still using electricity and the electricity you're using may or may not come from clean sources, but it is more distributed. And the more we have models like Llama 2 that are proficient but can be fine-tuned to be best in class at very specific use cases, the less we have to run the really big models like GPT-4, which have much higher ecological costs. So if we encourage people to continue to use open source models, to fine-tune them, to train them, to specialize them, you will lower the environmental impact, because I can run, and I am running, in fact, one of the Llama 2 variants on my laptop. And yeah, when I am actively using it, I can see the number of processors and the spikes go a little bit up. I can see the increase in power usage, but it is not anywhere near the power requirements to train a model. So the future of an ecologically sustainable and non-harmful AI program looks a lot like that, where you have smaller models that are very specialized. They're very well trained on specific tasks that consume relatively little power because they only do one or two things really well. And then, families of foundation models that give rise to those things. It's a really interesting question. It's an important question, and it's one that the jury is still out on just how much of an ecological cost AI imposes. It's not zero. We know it's not zero. When you run Llama 2 on your laptop and the processor starts and the fans start going, there is impact, right? If your laptop is a beefy gaming laptop, when those fans start spinning, the room you're in starts getting warmer. But if that can be distributed, if that can be minimized through specialization of models, it'll be better for everyone. So good question, an important question. Thanks for asking. I'll talk to you next time. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.